Hi, I've just read chapters 9, 10, and 11 of Reading, Writing, and Learning in ESL by Suzanne Peregoy and Owen Boyle. This is my summary of those chapters. In chapter 9, the authors talk about the research behind reading in a second language, and they tell us that reading in a second language is a similar process to reading in your first language. Although it's slightly more difficult to read in your second language, we approach reading in the same ways. Basically, students will look at the letters and sound them out to make words, use their knowledge of word order, grammar to be able to read and piece together a text. This works well if your students use an alphabet where each letter makes a sound. I had a couple of my students write their alphabets so we can look at some examples. So this is the Cyrillic alphabet, and while it might have some similar letters, it's very different. Even then, when Russian speakers read, they approach it in the same way English speakers do. Each letter makes a sound, and those sounds make words. So the word underneath is sobaka, which means dog, and you can see each of the letters in the word can be found in their alphabet. You might be surprised to learn that a lot of alphabets are phonemic. So Korean is also a phonemic written language. This is their alphabet, and the word dog, which is K at the top. If your student's first language has an alphabet that's based on symbols, they have to start there. This is Chinese for dog. These symbols represent words that aren't letters, so my student had to learn the alphabet and learn that each letter makes a sound, similar to how we learn to read in English. Readers also use their background knowledge of a text topic and its structure. So if students are going to read a book, maybe called Gone Camping, they can predict that the story will be about camping and it'll take place in the woods. If they see the word match, they'll use their background knowledge to figure out that the match in the story is to light a fire, not a match like a soccer match. Eventually, our goal is to get our students to be proficient readers. Readers gradually develop their ability to recognize words, and when they're able to recognize words quickly, they focus on the meaning of the words. We use what's called metacognition to fix reading errors, and we go back and reread when we make a mistake with a word. Proficient readers will apply their background knowledge and the structure of the text to make predictions about the text. These are some tools that we can instruct our students in using to get to a point of proficiency. Beginning second language readers are starting to take meaning from short text. You still have to remind them about instructions for reading because they will forget to read titles and headlines. They'll forget to try to take meaning from text when reading. For intermediate second language readers, story maps and directed reading thinking activities can help them with comprehension and memory. So for a story map, they might work out the setting and the characters in a text. For DRTA, the teacher guides them with questions throughout their reading to help with predictions, and eventually they start making their own questions. Miscue analysis is a tool that focuses on the reader's variations from print made during oral reading. Students read aloud, and the teacher will write any mistakes or incorrect pronunciation. It helps to determine students' strengths and weaknesses, and then you can figure out the reading strategies they're using or not using and how you can help them. Building on miscue analysis, you can use informal reading inventories to do something similar, but also have a backlog of the work and the progress that the student has made. Portfolio assessments are a collection of student work as a way of documenting student progress. This could be from their reading response journals or learning logs. It gives them an opportunity to analyze their progress and helps them assume responsibility for their learning. As students move on in their studies, they'll progress to more complex texts from the internet, newspapers, magazines, or what's written in their textbooks. We need to work on getting them to the point of being more experienced readers. These are some things that mature readers can do. They set a purpose for their reading, activate background knowledge, decode words automatically. They have a more sophisticated and advanced vocabulary, and they'll use cognitive and metacognitive strategies when they're reading. Because the texts they read are longer, the nature of how they interact with them is different than beginning readers that read stories. They'll work with aesthetic and effort stances towards the text. They'll use the text structure to their advantage, and they can recognize different structures like attributive structures where the author presents a main idea and an argument, or maybe a compare and contrast text. Lastly, metacognition is much more developed at this point, so they'll self-monitor and know when they need to go back and reread and when to use the different strategies that they've learned. To help students get to a more experienced reading level, we can include different things in our instruction that will help them develop good habits. Before students read, background knowledge should be activated. Students need to have a reason for reading. If you tell someone to read something and they don't know why, they feel lost before they even begin. And when they finish, they won't remember anything they read. They should have a general idea of what they're going to read beforehand. To build background knowledge, you can make a word map with students. You might choose a word and have students think of other words related to the topic. You could use a structured overview, like a graphic displaying the main ideas in a text. And you can use an anticipation guide, which is essentially a couple of questions that students will answer before they read and again after they read. Gets them thinking about how they feel about the topic, and now they know what they're looking to take away from the text so that they're able to answer the questions again at the end. During reading strategies are meant to help students evaluate if they understood what they were supposed to take away from a text. They would base it off of their purpose for reading. I really like to make use of headings and subheadings in a text and also the pictures that accompany the text. Students will completely ignore headings and subheadings. They think they just need to read the text. And so pointing it out and showing them how they can use it can help them develop their predicting skills, and ideally, they'd be able to use it independently in the future. So, for example, this is the heading of a text in the book I'm currently using, Rings That Returned. I get students to think about what they might read. They come up with some ideas. Usually, they're pretty much spot on about what the text is related to people losing and finding their rings. Then I show the pictures that go along with the text and have them think of how the people lost their rings. Again, we're looking at DRTA. One way to make use of that in this stage is have students create their own questions based on headings. Maybe instead of me asking students what they thought they would read about, they could formulate their own questions like, what happened to the rings? Where were the rings? Why did the people lose the rings? And by having these questions, when they move beyond the heading and start reading, they know what to look for. Using clustering to develop vocabulary and context is one way to help students understand new words they encounter in their reading. It teaches them to guess and confirm a word's meaning by the context of its use. Students look at a sentence without a word and try to guess a word that would work in the sentence. So maybe I'd use this sentence and they might come up with some ideas. Afterwards, I would reveal the word that's missing and talk about any synonyms that they've thought of. Post-reading activities help students organize and remember the information they've gathered in reading. With semantic feature analysis, students make a graph with the vocabulary words from a text and note traits of a category. Other strategies include using mapping, like what's here in the top right corner, clustering and structured overview, like I've discussed before, to make connections between words, rehearsing information through discussion, repetition, or creating maps is necessary for memory. Venn diagrams, like the one here in the corner, are useful for comparing and contrasting. Reciprocal teaching involves students becoming teachers within their own groups. Writing is a great tool to use in post-reading. Some strategies for writing are learning logs, dialogue buddy journals, response journals, photo essays, and research projects. Photo essays are a fun way to get students being creative. I like to choose funny pictures to make stories about, like this one, but you could also allow them to choose their own pictures. And of course, research projects are a teacher favorite because they get students collaborating, reading, and writing, working on presenting their ideas in an organized format, and they're using a lot of different skills. To summarize some of the ideas we looked at today, I put together an example lesson plan using some of the strategies. So let's say that I wanted to do a lesson about fear. I might start with some pictures of things people are afraid of and get the students building their background knowledge. Once we've established that our theme is fear, they can make a word map about different words that are similar to fear, words you might use when talking about fear. Then they could make another about common fears that people have. The title of this text is Conquering a Fear. I'm going to assume that my students don't know the word conquer, so I can use clustering to develop vocabulary and context. I can give them the sentence with the word missing. They can think of words that they could use in the sentence. Then we can talk about words that are similar and establish the meaning. Then we can look at the title of the text and incorporate DRTA. So I can get my students to make some questions about what they'll read to set their purpose for reading. After that, they could summarize what they read. For a creative outlet, they could write about a fear they have and use the text as a model. And finally, they could respond to another student's writing about their fear. Thank you for watching.